Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to Futureproofing Now's Season 3, Episode 1, Emerging 30 Technologies. And this is our favorite one. We say this about all of our podcast webcasts. It's our latest ranking of your next 10-year future. So if you didn't know what was going to be happening in 2031, you'll know today. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Andrea Cates, and I'm one of the co-founders of Futureproofing Next, and Sean Moffitt, the other co-founder of Futureproofing Next. Sean, you want to say hi?
Hey, Andrea, how are you?
I'm doing great. And so the reason we say this is our favorite is that Sean and I have been doing this for now. This is our third season, and this is the season where we start to see backwards and forwards, what we've been talking about and what's coming ahead. And we've got awards coming up. And today is our episode where lots of research that's longitudinal and really pretty compelling that Sean's been leading for a few years is coming to the forefront. So we're going to talk to Sean about the longitudinal insights, and also we're going to be projecting into the future with some very cool panelists. We also want to let you know that we are minting a new concept this year. Not just because COVID and virtual is the only thing that mattered last year, but because in 2021, Sean and I realized that after the concept of a not a book, we had to have the not alive. And so instead of being live, we are super excited. We are doing something called Futureproofing You, which will launch March 26th. And it's a way that you can experience all of the tools and canvases and opportunities that we've developed with these models of future-proofing. So please join us. And if you are listening, it's futureproofingnext.com/futureproofing-you, like a U, all one word. So here we go, the emerging 30 technologies, and how will we rank them this year? And if we could, we would animate this, and there would be like special sci-fi music, like boom, 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 and something would turn out at the top. So, or if we were in Las Vegas, it would be a slot machine, and we'd like wonder, is it the cherry coming? Go, come on, cherries. But what's interesting about this year is, first of all, we'll turn to Sean about how he's been really leading this and driving this research for years, but also what's really interesting about what's new. So Sean, tell us a little bit first about how this all comes about.
Well, I think that if there's anything I know, given my recovering marketing status, is people love lists. And as much as the list is only as good as the thinking that goes into it, I think, certainly more than anything I've done over the last decade, this probably gets the most attention. And I think part of it is people know technology is a big part of their future. And people love to discern what's going to hit them in that future. And people, certainly I'm a sports fan. And so people debate who's like the best third baseman ever. Well, in tech, people debate, what is the technology that's going to reign supreme over the next decade? And that's what we're trying to do here.
So let's talk about this. And one of the things that's been great is we've got this great future-proofing community, and we wanted to welcome everyone who's here as part of the live broadcast webcast, and also people who are listening later in podcast land. We're excited that this growing community of future proofers is coming, so that next year, maybe all of you can be on the show because you'll be so expert at this. But one of the things that I'll read for people listening in is that the emerging 30 technologies, why is this important? I mean, in addition to the lists and the stats. So I'll read this first, and then I'll let Sean kind of comment. Like, A, it's the biggest enabler of progress and innovation. B, way too tribalized. C, fascinated with the novel, what has staying power. And D, find out the use cases and applications. So I'll do a little one, and then Sean, I'd love for you to give your comments about this. So before this webcast, we engaged the future-proofing community, and what they said is, how come the best technology doesn't always win? Second theme, oh my gosh, should we catch up or should we just give up? Because it's so complicated, and everybody keeps telling me that these things are coming and they seem really hard to figure out how to apply. Number three is, if you don't have good user interface and good understanding, it's not going to become a business model. So we know that that's really important. And number four is, I was just looking at something having to do with green hydrogen as a technology from like this year, right? And then I decided, let me go back to 1970. And I swear the exact same sentences. It's coming any day now. So it was literally like 1970, 2021, the exact same predictions. Green hydrogen is just on the horizon. So Sean, tell me about your thoughts about why this is so important.
Yeah, I think you've encapsulated really well. I think the only maybe additional two things I would add is, and maybe this links to some of the guests that we've got coming on, the way to tribalize piece. I find people just identify with a technology and only that technology. So there's the blockchain guy, and there's the AI woman, and there's that group of people that all they do is focus on energy all the time. And we thought we'd step back and go, look, there's a much broader landscape. And candidly, all of these things are fusing together. And so if you don't have a good literacy on one, how are you going to be really good on the other? And I'd also say, hopefully today acts as a springboard. Just saying that you love AI and you want to do something about it really doesn't matter unless you get to actually identifying some interesting use cases and applications that help out in the real world, which is where most of us live. So, and I guess maybe I just add, people oftentimes go, well, where'd you get your list? Everybody has their list. Gartner has their list, and IDC has their list, and a whole bunch of different people. Very simply, we've been doing this for the last 6 years, and we look at what's the current size of what we're talking about, the segment of technology, what's the expected growth. We do look for Google search terms as a representation of how mainstream is the interest and is it growing. We have an expert panel, but at the end of this presentation, we would love to involve you. And then finally, we overlay, I guess, the future-proofingness of all of this by looking at stuff and going, yeah, I know that's what the numbers say, but we want to apply some type of thought in terms of, well, if that happened and that happened, a future scenario would be quite different. And so we do apply a little bit of special sauce at the end, Andrea.
And I'll give the last part before I let you introduce our incredible panelists. So one thing that we say in the land of future proofing is we are not here to predict a future. I mean, it's nice to know that, what's coming, but that's only part of it. The thought of, oh, let's be absolutely positive of what's coming. We call that arrogance. And so we're not those kind of futurists. As future proofers, we're more interested in encouraging everybody who's listening or watching today to feel empowered. What can you be curious about? What are the jobs to be done that you're really struggling with that maybe a technology could help with? Or which technologies have really come of age that you can finally go back and pull out that drawer and go, remember that thing we were going to solve? Maybe machine learning can actually do it. So sometimes we are waiting for the rate limiting factor being the advancement in the technology. Sometimes we're waiting for the technology to find a reason, raison d'etre, and like that's another idea. So we're really looking to the audience today and the participants today and the panelists today to understand, we're not trying to predict. If we're wrong and 10 years from now, we're like, wow, that wasn't what happened. That's okay. We just want everyone in the future proofing world to feel enabled and empowered to grow their businesses based on these trends.
I thought I'd introduce our esteemed guests, and I was commenting to both of them. Isn't it refreshing to have a technology panel with generally, or at least a majority of women here? And Mihaela, I am not intimidated, but certainly I am looking forward to this. So I'd love to introduce Dr. Mihaela Ulieru, and I'm sure I'll be told later whether or not I got that correctly. She hails from DC. She is president of the Impact Institute for the Digital Economy. You can find her whereabouts on LinkedIn there. I love her description. She's a tech alchemist and an innovator at the edge of the impossible, which is such a good encapsulation for somebody that's talking about what we're doing today. Her Impact Institute focuses on policy reform for the adoption of the latest technologies in society. And she has a long, and I mean a long list of both councils and research chairs and labs and a plethora of different advisory panels, one of which was in Canada, which was good to see. She does speak Canadian too. And she is part of a council on the World Economic Forum. So Mihaela, welcome.
Thank you so much. And if I may just a very brief statement here to Andrea's empowerment take on the future technologies. This is so important. The work which you are doing is so important because you are empowering decision makers and business owners to actually make crucial decisions about their future. Why? because otherwise they will be dislocated. And as you, Sean, mentioned, technologies, especially now, they are coming together, converging, and with exponential effects, which we do not, we think, and, I hate to make this parallel with a pandemic. I think we're going to refer to this later. But just like the pandemic, it spread around the world without us actually even noticing and worrying. That's how the new technologies are going to dislocate what is today. And we will not even notice. So it's so important to pay attention to your work. Thank you for doing this.
Oh, wow. Well, I feel energized now. That's a good way to kick us off. Alexandra, we're setting a very high bar. Alexandra, I want to introduce Alexandra Moxanne. She's from Vancouver, so fellow Canadian. We are going to take over the world one day, I think, but in a nice way. So she's a founder of the Advanced Tech Media, founder of Advanced Tech Media, but also a host of a very good podcast, which I've seen a few episodes of, Advanced Tech Podcast. She lives in emerging tech. She interviews a lot of leaders and developers from around the world that deal in that as well. She has a fluency across a range of tech, which is really one of the intriguing factors of having both of our panelists today. They just don't talk about one specific technology. And she has a background in analytics and business development and digital transformation. So a fully formed left and right brain. Alexandra, welcome.
Thanks so much. Thanks very much for having me. I really appreciate being on the show. And I love the fact that you're looking at this from a holistic perspective. Oftentimes we do attach on a particular technology and we think, this one thing's going to change the world. But when we look, forward and we imagine what the future might look like, there's going to be a lot of things that are incorporated in that future. Will you be using machine learning for some of our advanced analytics that give us, traffic patterns and things like that for our self-driving cars in order to be able to plot the best route, which then perhaps they'll negotiate the fastest path with a particular kind of cryptocurrency, probably Bitcoin, I hope. So yeah, it's a very multi-dimensional path in the future.
I already know we're going to have debates on blockchain and where it fits. It's just inevitable. So let's get there soon. Now, Andrea, this has existed in many places across the last, 4 years, and at least in this form. More than anything else, millions of people have actually seen this ranking of 30, which we did last time. And so many people hate me for it as well, because their particular technology wasn't higher on the list. But we did want to say that we do put some rigor in it. We look at every single research study we can get our hands on, including some primary research. And we put some numbers behind it too. So that will be the inevitability on this one. But today we are just going to talk about the raw technologies. And hopefully in the future, there's a report that we will put out in March that will take it one step down and not only talk about the technology, but the 10 applications of those technologies. And Andrea, I thought maybe we should include our panel in this effort in terms of, regardless of what the 30 technologies are on the list, this is where the world thinks we're going. And so maybe some comments.
So let me ask Alexandra, because I'll read it for the people listening, because we keep getting feedback that podcasters really like for us to let them know what's on the screen. So I'll give context, and then let's go to Alexandra first. So what we're looking at here is a notion of, an effective technology / digital leader mindset. And once again, this is what we can universally apply. It's not just the tech, it's also how we approach it. So the thought of, in the future, in organizations, technology activities should be more, right, decentralized or centralized, right, disintermediated global. Should it be ethical, purpose-driven more, or more bottom line efficiency-driven? These aren't necessarily, there's a lot of middle ground, right? People and customer-driven, tech and data-driven, under full IT control, like it used to be. We had the locks and the chains and everybody was in their cells. You can't touch technology to sort of, completely democratize technology. Sometimes, it has to come back under control again. And especially, as we'll talk about with security, under full business control, or what's that right balance, proprietary or open. So Alexandra, tell us your thoughts on this sliding scale of sliders.
Well, I think it's really interesting that you look at this from a spectrum. And I think it's important to plot new technology on that because you want to see how it fits in with the current landscape. Just saying, this one tech will solve our world problems is definitely not going to be the case. You need to be really focused on what the user is experiencing and what the business cases are. So I really appreciated in one of your first slides how it did have user experience and business case on it as a main component. I think it's important to look at these because as they roll out, you need to consider what the existing landscape is and where the barriers might be for adoption. So, if it is something that's fully decentralized, do you have the infrastructure in order to be able to roll that out properly? Will people in city centers be able to have access all the technology, whereas people in more remote locations, they won't be able to benefit from that. And I think also the second line, the ethical and purpose-driven versus bottom line and efficiency-driven. I think as we incorporate better data into our solutions, we don't necessarily need to make that a choice. We can choose to do something that's ethical and purpose-driven, yet also meets the bottom line and efficiency goals.
Well, I'll do a very quick follow-up. This is one of those so many slides and not enough time sessions. However, I do have a question about that because we'll be talking about ethics in a little bit and transparency and trust, which is critical to all of this. So in your sense, is there more concern or less concern in your particular barometer reading right now in terms of the trust and ethics?
I think it's a slippery slope. I think that data gives us the ability to be more mindful about our choices, and we'll be able to see through data what we might, oftentimes people have assumptions for what they're doing, and then they realize if you actually look at the data, the use case that was identified is this is going to be our primary use case is not used at all. Slack is a perfect example of that. Their first business model wasn't great, and then they pivoted, and now it's worldwide, based on just a team messaging model, which is very interesting. Yeah. So I think as we incorporate data, we can make better decisions, and better decisions lead us to better outcomes.
Well, this, as I said, we're going to run out of time, but Mihaela, did you want to mention anything about that as well? Or
just very quickly, yes, just very quickly, just because of the beautiful coincidence, this week we have the Davos agenda. And yesterday, the founder of the World Economic Forum, Professor Klaus Schwab, launched his new book named Stakeholder Capitalism, in which he actually posed exactly this question and answered it very beautifully. So indeed, we have to look beyond stuffing our own purse if we are a CEO and a decision maker and a big global business, and think about, well, how much people contributed to my success, because governments many times fuel these companies in the beginning with a lot of support, but this is done from people's tax money. So actually it is everyone who is contributing. Therefore, it is time to think about the rest of us and what are the rewards. I mean, are we going to improve the life for everyone with our business or not? So it becomes now an imperative for everyone.
Once again, so we need a whole hour just on that, with sort of the future of capitalism, because that's one of Sean's and my favorite topics. We talk about it nonstop. So it's all related, and some of these unintended consequences of the advancements in technology really point to those questions. So Sean, let's go back to you and let's have you look at the next topic.
Yeah, it's almost like baiting an animal here in terms of we just want to see the list. What's the new list? And we're giving you some pretext and context. So I'd suggest we just zip through this. But I think if you look at every single one of the technologies we are going to talk about today, it's rooted in the top 5 attributes that people believe are going to be part of a digital company traits of the future: open, smarter, customer-driven, agile and speedier, secure and trusted. And I think that 5th one, certainly there's one ranking on the list that has had a meteoric rise over the last 2 years. And so the secure and trusted part is certainly a big thing. And then Andrea, just as a twin gap here, so you're a leader. Many of us that listen to this webcast and podcast are leaders. What is the biggest challenge going to be? And historically, there's been some things around making the case for different technologies and the risk associated with it. But by far and away, it's the people side of it. It's the talent and skills and who's actually going to lead and who's actually going to do. So, Andrea?
Well, to me, the thought that is really I think universal, and I'll be brief on this because it's going to come up later, is we got some feedback in the pre-work for this on social media, where it's really all about people anymore, right? So, I mean, the technology is super important, and we are completely advocates of don't just use buzzwords. Please do not say blockchain if you have no idea what it is. These become cliches really, really quickly. So, take the time to learn and study before you start spouting. It's one of my rants. But in the other side, the kinds of talents that we need to manage things as the technology advances is different. So if you think about even AI, what was it, 40 years ago, 30 years ago, the Turing test, you needed to know like machine language, and you couldn't even really get into it. And you could, do business analytics if you could talk in zeros and ones. Now, a lot of those tools have advanced to the point where mere mortals can get involved, which is a little dangerous, kind of like me with a drawing program. That does not an artist make. And so I think that the talent and skills that used to be important, and this is what I'm also interested in how the panelists feel. So let me throw it to the panelists. Let's start with Mihaela. What is your thought about the biggest obstacle confronting the tech leaders?
I agree with the talent and skills, but on the other side, this is a broader issue because technology is starting to replace a lot of people as well. So, for example, last year in 2020, the companies which made the top of the NASDAQ and so on and so forth were those which have actually replaced people with technology. And this is so it was a so-called bear market for humans. So this is also another blind spot which the pandemic has revealed to us. This is all I have to say right now, because I know we are limited on time.
So the obvious joke, if it's a bear market for humans, does that make it a human market for bears? No, I'm kidding. I'm sorry. We just need a little levity. Okay. So that was a joke. So Alexandra, what about you? What is the biggest obstacle confronting tech leaders?
I think making sure that you have a realistic use case and that use case incorporates diverse perspectives. So that's one of the key things. We're always thinking about, oh, that's a great new idea, but how does it actually fit in the real world? And how is that rolled out in the real world?
Okay.
So that's really important to look at.
Very interesting. And that mirrors what Sean said. Sean, do you want to weigh in on this before we move to the next one?
Once again, we've covered it off in innovation and transformation, and probably ignored it candidly 10 years ago. Like the people side of it, Andrea, we would say we've really bulked up over the last decade in terms of its importance of any kind of strategy or innovation deployment. It's true in technology as well. And so we're going to do a reverse countdown here. So, are we ready with bated breath to see what's on the list? All right. I like the enthusiasm. And then the one thing, and I know you've had a brief chance, and part of it was intended and part of it was, this is so fresh that we just got some stuff to you last night and some stuff this morning, panelists. Are there any fears of something that didn't make the list? I know in sports, it's like, it's the 26th most important player on the team, and we worry, are they going to make the team or not? Is there any technology that you're going, please, God, I hope it's on the list? And maybe, Alexandra, we'll pivot to you. Are there any ones that you're rooting for here or worried about didn't make the cut?
So the ones that I'm rooting for are artificial intelligence and machine learning, which I'm certain is near the top of the list, if not at the top. I think that it's important not to, trying to think of the right wording. If it's on the top of the list, it probably should be on top of the list. And if it's not, then maybe it needs a little bit more time to develop. And I think that's true for all tech.
And Mihaela?
I think, at least, I really love the list, but I have a question, and I am actually pretty big on this suggestion that CRISPR, this is the genome editing technology, which is pretty new, but also very impactful because it helps, and of course, with a lot of ethical conundrums. So it helps us get rid of malaria because it can sterilize mosquito females, but it also can help us, determine if, for example, our babies will have a disease which can be cured already before birth. We could eliminate those kind of diseases as well. already before birth. So it's really very powerful, as well as, you know, we can get rid of pests, we can get rid of killer hornets by genetic engineering. So this is, CRISPR is really raising, and I would have loved if you could have made your list.
Well, it's included under a branch of things, but we didn't specifically call it out. But it's actually, that's a really good caveat before we get into the list. Some people want to be very clinical and say, this is a technology and this isn't a technology. And other people go, well, these are industry groups that need to use this technology. So, you know, fintech and agritech and all these things, we have a blended list. We're not going to be pure about it. So we're candidly saying, look, if people are congregating around a set of technologies or one specific, you know, technology, we're going to call that out as opposed to be really clinical one way or the other. And Andrea, before we get started, any thoughts in advance?
Well, no, I just really like what Mihaela said just now, because I think healthcare, first of all, because of the technologies like CRISPR, you know, the technology has gotten much more front of mind because of the pandemic. And also, you know, we now know that virologists are super important, and, you know, the ability to use good logistics to disseminate testing. I mean, there's all these things that are front of mind, and I don't think it's just anecdotally important or just temporarily important. I think that, you know, we are now much more democratized with regard to the data that we have. And boy, talk about privacy. You know, if people know about, you know, CRISPR brings up a lot of ethical issues. So I think that there is this convergence, and I really like what both Mihaela and Alexandra said about it.
And the only thing I'd say is we got about 25 minutes before we may want to open it up to the audience. So if there are questions or controversies that people want to put in the chat box, please do. And for our panelists today, we're going to spend about 3 minutes per each slide. And so it's a quick get in, get out, get your punches in, and then let's move on to the next, so we can at least make sure we do the full reverse countdown. So our 21 to 30. So these are the ones that actually did squeeze and make into the list. And certainly agritech and aerospace and space weren't on our list from last time. I'm looking for other ones here that I think the other 8, actually fintech, if there was one hue and cry from last time, it was like, please God, you're not calling out fintech. And so we have ceded to some popular demand. But if I look at the set of technologies on fintech, there are very specific things around compliance, know your customer, that you know, should probably be called out as a separate branch of technology. So edge computing has gone up, quantum computing has gone up, voice assistance and linguistics has gone down, not because it isn't as popular, but it was red hot last year, and now it's kind of gone down a few places. Advanced materials probably deserves to be higher, but all of these things are amazing. Nanotechnology has gone down a little bit. Clean tech has gone up. New touches, interfaces, and screens has stayed around the same. And then agritech and aerospace and space. You know, principally, if you have one of the richest men in the world that wants to go to space, you're going to probably find a way to make it on the list. So, so thank you, Elon Musk, for getting it there. I'll open it up for comments in terms of our last, what is it, tertile? I don't know what it is when it's 1/3, but any comments or reactions right away, guys?
Let's start with Mihaela. Any thoughts about, does this surprise you, or does it fit with your expectations?
No, it goes with my expectations. So this is check.
Check. Okay, Alexandra.
Let's save the time for it. Yes.
Okay, great. Alexandra.
Sure. I think this is, again, this is looking at this, I see a number of technologies that can work together. And I think if you look at these lists and notice overall trends, I think it's important to call that out. So I'd be curious to see where these are in the next couple of years, if they stay as a cluster or if they start differentiating and coming out as a pure technology.
Well, I'll make a very quick observation, then we'll move on. Some things couldn't have been on the list because they couldn't have existed, you know, so the convergence of lots of technologies that have come to the forefront to really enable some of these as a category. You know, agritech is an example. We were talking about soil as the new data. You know, lots of these things, the advancements have been so rapid, as you said, Mihaela, in terms of the exponential growth, that now it's real. And so I think that these categories themselves are of interest to me, because once again, agritech, you know, 40 years ago, what would that have been? You know, it would have been probably machines versus sensors. And you know, lots of the advancements are only possible. You know, you can't create a category until the technology comes of age. So back to you, Sean.
Well, and the only thing, I know somebody today, all they had to say, I think their only line to me was, quantum computing. Are you not kidding me? It shouldn't be higher. So I'm just to call it, it's on the list. It's there. It's important, but I think deservedly at 22, there are some thoughts that it can tackle some of the bigger challenges, and we've seen it work on vaccine development and a whole bunch of other things. But does it really help somebody kind of jump onto their browser at home or create things for real life? And that's probably the reason why it's at 22 right now.
And one quick thing too, in terms of the community, there's some really good conversation going on. Feel free to just send us your comments or your observations, because we can either comment on it or looking at it live, and we would love to hear what you've been thinking when you look at lists like this.
All right, now that we've got into the rhythm of it, we'll do the next 10, and then the following ones will have some time to breathe because there'll be less technologies on the screen. We're dealing with the admittedly lesser technologies here. So this is our 11 to 20 list. They fall just off the major charts. A bit of clarification here. So CX technologies, customer experience technologies, we've seen an absolute ramp up in e-commerce and delivery and a whole bunch of different technologies that ordinarily it might have gone down some versus some of the other technologies, but really everybody has jumped on board with the fact that retail and selling is actually a digital thing now. Energy tech includes like the full range of energy tech. Collaborative tech, we didn't put remote work as part of this, but I think inextricably, we've seen that, Salesforce buying Slack. There's probably a reason why they've done that. And a lot of it is we need to collaborate better online, particularly as we're not in our offices anymore. Your CRISPR at 16, I would include under that camp. So I haven't called it out specifically, but human computer interaction is up, 3D printing, and I've added the value added manufacturing. And mobile tech, this has gone way down, and it's not the 5G part of mobile, but it's really, if you look at the level of innovation that's come out of Apple or any of the smartphones, I would argue that perhaps the heyday of mobile hardware, app stores, a whole bunch of different things, maybe has gone. That might be a controversial thing to say, but certainly it's more incremental than it has been in the past. I'll open it up to our panel for thoughts.
Yeah, so Alexandra, what do you think of this one first? Let's start with you.
Sure. So again, it's a nice holistic picture of technologies that work together. I think big data is really one of the things that informs a lot of these technologies. You want to make sure that, you can analyze the data based on, is this the right interface for some of the customer experience, and to determine, yes, it is, or yes, it works in this region, but not necessarily in this region. And it allows you to adapt and flow in development, which is really important.
Okay, Mihaela?
And just to take on from there, I think big data is merging more and more with artificial intelligence, with methods to process faster and better. And to the energy tech, I think it's merging more and more with materials, advanced materials, which you have there, and of which I also had a favorite, graphene. It is considered to be a technology in itself. You can create screens, you can create tattoos like sensors, which can tell you the heart rate. And it's really a revolutionary technology, which is spinning out from advanced materials now. And you have energy, solar panels with graphene, and also others like nanodiamond batteries that have, let's say, hundreds of years duration. I was buying a startup which is doing that. But anyway, it's a lot to say there, especially with regard to the convergence of several of these ones.
So there are two questions from the community. I think it's important to address if we've got a little time. So one is thinking there's a comment, thinking that health tech might rise because of COVID, just kind of front of mind. Second is reading number 15 in terms of collaborative tech and remote work. The question was that what about the coverage of soft technology like mindset and cultural transformations needed to interact with the hard tech? And so, so any comments from either of the panelists on that?
I think 16, for biotech, as we get better solutions, we are able to live longer and longer, have better healthcare outcomes. So I think it's really important to think of holistically, again, how it works with everything. Our, healthy environment, healthy people in healthy environments is really key. And again, data will help inform some of those decisions. I'll let Mihaela talk about collaborative tech.
Yes, and with regard to health tech, also personalization, yes, like merging artificial intelligence with healthcare and other technologies, it enables practically to tell you what you need. So it is there is a rise of this in health tech, and of course merged with big data. And I just I do not understand the question about collaborative. Sorry, Alexandra.
Sure.
Maybe.
Oh. So I'll jump in here.
I lost the track. I think.
No, that's okay. I'll make a quick comment because
Okay.
Sean and I were talking about, there was a book years ago called The Invisible Computer, and the thought that nobody really wanted a computer at all. You know, it was that we wanted what it did. And so, you know, you couldn't even imagine wanting something that it could do until it could kind of sort of a little bit do it. And so a lot of these things are interesting to us because, you know, we don't want it at all. You know, if a Fitbit is getting in the way of what I really want, which is a sensor in my brain that's just going to keep me fit and healthy and, you know, and living a long time, these things get in the way until they don't. And so I think that's really what you've said, Mihaela and Alexandra, is really interesting. And it reinforces what Sean and I think, which is, you know, at a certain point, the technology is not enabling at all. It's kind of getting in the way of the job to be done. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, sensors? Yeah, well, that's in my Apple Watch now. It used to be on a Cray computer, right? So Sean, back to you.
Well, and the only thing I would say on the health tech, as it was mentioned, this actually represents a massive increase for health tech, because in our last rendition of this, we'd included biotech and genomics under the health tech umbrella. Now we've split them out, but split them out halfway up the list. And so it's really, if I look at anything through this pandemic that's come to the fore, beyond maybe the remote work aspect of the fact that we're never going back to the work the same way we were before, I think biotech on kind of how do we solve the world's problems, and health tech in terms of an industry went from 3% kind of digital to 97% digital almost overnight. And so a lot of things around that. Are we ready to breathe a little and look at a list of 5 technologies, at least something maybe that we can look at here? Automation, robotics, which does include autonomous automobiles and drones, immersive media, which includes all the R's, AR, MR, XR, any other R that you want to include. We have included a new technology this year. We've broken AI out into its 3 component parts. At 9 is AI and superintelligence. This is probably the stuff that you look at on movies. It's like, how does AI appear like humans and actually approximate our intelligence, and includes a lot of stuff around deep learning. And then finally, I know it's controversial because it's a step back for blockchain. We've got it at 10. I believe it was at number 5 last year. And I think we might be looking at the slope of disillusionment on blockchain, where it's about to become really productive, but there's been some missteps and some wild westness of blockchain that maybe has to rid our system before it affects all of us. Thoughts from the panel?
A lot of thoughts, actually, yes. So I will start with, I mean, all of them are kind of straightforward, but for automation and robotics, you know, for me, they were always kind of merged into one, because robotics is a result of automation, and it is actually what implements automation. I did my PhD in robotics and automation, and probably that's why, as you say, I look at them holistically here. And now they are merging with this AI super intelligence, because we are creating humanoid robots. You know, the first citizen android, Sophia, is already there. She met with the United Nations leaders and got citizenship in Saudi Arabia, and so on and so forth. So yeah, these technologies definitely are right, and they are at the right place there. They will merge into one again, and this is scary. I agree. Artificial general intelligence is coming very soon. Ray Kurzweil mentioned that by 2029, we will have the artificial general intelligence reaching human intelligence, but from then on, it will surpass it. And we better train these intelligences to AI, with AI for good. So that is another aspect which I want to mention here. With regard to blockchain, I have to say that, yes, because I'm the one who brought blockchain on the top 10 in 2016 at the World Economic Forum, and it was quite a race and a battle there. I agree with you that it's more or less taking a step back, but it will take a very big jump forward very soon. And I give you just a simple example in how COVID is accelerating this need, as well as voting and what's happening here behind my back in the US. So at the Capitol and so on and so forth. So blockchain, so the CDC director just mentioned that she has no idea now after the transition, how many people have been vaccinated, how much vaccines are there, and this is what blockchain solves. You can track and know, and even get a vaccination passport so I can remember, and I will be notified when do I need the second dose. So there is a big conundrum going on right now because we do not use the power of the ledger that blockchain is enabling, and the technology is there. I have to say so much more, but I will refrain.
We'll have to have a blockchain only show because it's probably time for that to be like front of mind, and we could even do the battleground, at some point, the blockchain battleground. So let's let Alexandra address this as well, sure. of this 6 to 10 list.
Yeah, so first of all, it's really nice to see artificial intelligence be separated out into its subfields. Right now, we're kind of still at the machine learning phase of AI. And as we move into creating human minds and that kind of synthetic intelligence, where, it kind of unlocks our dreams and nightmares all in one, I think that it's good to think about this because right now, AI is constrained usually with one data set, and it doesn't solve a new problem based on that. But I think the minute that we see that, this is quickly going to become something that we need to be very aware of. One of the things as well is we have a lot of researchers in this area. We have a lot of data scientists, and I think we need to start incorporating more people from more humanistic fields. So philosophers, behavioral psychologists, and sociologists, and people that really think about what does this look like for development of it's not just new technology. In a sense, we're creating a new mind. And in order to create that we need to make sure that we're not just shoving it into a very narrow scope of, what it will do and how it will serve us. And I think we need to move the conversation from how it will serve us and potentially control us to how might we empower this to develop as it will best develop.
Well, I have a quick comment and then let's move on to the next one. So one of the things that we noticed too is if you ask a fish, how's the water? The fish says, what's water? Because it's just so obvious. And so I think that based on what you're saying, and it's sort of what Sean and I believe too, is there's some things that are going to be so embedded and so natural to us, like blockchain might be one of them, where it's just part of our banking. It's just part of the way that vaccines are dispensed. I mean, I have no idea how they did it so fast in Israel, but they got the passport right away. They know who's who and what's what, probably in China as well. And so there can be set moments where we don't have to say blockchain because it's just the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, technology is fading in the background. Just one, before you go to the next, I just have to address this one, the immersive media, because it goes together with the collaborative technologies. Right now, yeah, I wish I could be with you with some glasses with AR, VR, and they are definitely emerging. During this pandemic, there was so much progress on AR, VR, and immersive media. It was our salvation, more or less. So there is a new technology that is coming up. And again, just like with CRISPR, and you can debate that it is new technology or not, but it's called the spatial web. So the web is moving from the page to space through this immersive media, and that's going to cause a transformation. If I'm going to shop now, I'm going to be able to touch virtually the tomatoes and maybe even smell them. So it's changing completely the world. Supply chains also. So now in 3D, you can calculate exactly and retrieve them, and you can actually together with robots. And this immersive media, you can automate everything. I have a lot to say there, but keep an eye on immersive media. This is my message here.
Yeah, especially with what Amazon's doing there. There's a whole, and Soul Machines. I mean, there's just so many places where I was saying, we were talking about the uncanny valley. It's like my uncanny valley has become my canny valley. They're all blending. I just saw Deepak Chopra as a robot, as a bot the other day. So back to you, Sean.
All right, I thought you were going to go on a 10-minute detour on Deepak Chopra. So we gotta get to the end of the list. If we don't cover off the next 5, people are going to be pissed off. But the one thing I will say, just on the timeline on the list, I will remind people this is a 10-year purview. And so to Alexandra's point, I think Mihaela, you were talking about it too. The superintelligence part of AI, I guarantee you, I will say it right now, if this was a 50-year list, this would be number 1 by far. We would have to deal with the ethical and societal implications of that. Having said that, we're talking up until 2031. I don't know if they'll take over just quite yet. Number 5, cybersecurity and trust proofing. And I'll be honest, this was further down the list 2 years ago. And I've added trust proofing just because it's not just defending yourself, it's actually rooting out deep fakes and trying to figure out what's real and what isn't, and providing some certification of trust. And so I've included both in the mix here. This is number 5. I know in a previous piece of research, we asked people, what is the next gray swan moment that will hit us? You know, we've had this pandemic over the last year and a half. Cybersecurity was, not by leaps and bounds, but certainly the number 1 thing people thought was going to hit us next in terms of what might bring society to its knees. So I'll open it up to the panel for a couple of minutes of conversation on this.
Sure. So cybersecurity is really important. I mean, we've just recently experienced that. It's definitely a point that any of your systems can really be, they can be damaged, and with that, trust is damaged. And I think that might be at the heart of why it's higher this year, is people are seeing, if you can't trust what you're seeing, then what can you trust? And I think a lot of people are feeling very disillusioned, especially after, the year of this global pandemic and lockdowns and everything changing so rapidly. So I think the ability to verify something in the future is going to be very, very key. In Bitcoin, we say don't trust, verify. And I think that that's really important. When you don't know what you can trust, don't trust, and, find a way that you can verify something. So, we'll see things such as, fingerprints of technology and ways that we can verify based on maybe a QR code or something going forward, that I think will be really important. And this is something, again, that must be baked into all solutions, especially as we get more and more exponential with our tech.
I really liked how you classified them, cybersecurity, trust proofing, because it kind of sounds very much like blockchain technologies to me. Anyway, this is so it is very related to cryptography and how we actually can process now on encrypted data directly. So it is by itself a new way of doing things in cyberspace, and it is very important. So what I have to say also with regard to the previous technologies, quantum computing is going to change this game. It's going to change the stage for cybersecurity and trust proofing from how it will solve it in many ways, but it will also unravel. Like nothing from what we have learned will stand. Everything will change. Everything will be decrypted with quantum computers. So we have to be prepared for that. Leaders definitely keep an eye on it and be quantum proof. That's how we call it also in the cryptographic community. So this is a kind of, it gives me the chills still. It's not solved, and it's, it may get worse as other technologies are coming, but they will solve it, hopefully.
And Andrea,
let's just go to number 4. I think we should get all these in. There's lots to say. I'll say some at the end.
Cool. So mobile internet does end up there. Certainly, if you are any kind of telco, your investment in infrastructure is all around 5G. Certainly, there's a thought that in 4 or 5 years, 60% of the world's population will be on 5G. Allowing very low latency and super, super fast connection, and being able to power some of the technologies that may be even further up the list than 4. So, so the whole universe of how do we create a faster mobile internet that works is at number 4. Thoughts from the panelists?
So again, this is something that I think we'll see embedded throughout tech in the next few years. The fact that you can get instant data or near instant data on something is very interesting. And I think that will help, as technology speeds up, as the world speeds up, It'll help verify a number of things. One of the things that I think we need to talk about as well is misinformation. I think that is going to be probably one of the biggest challenges for any of these new technologies is counteracting the FUD. So the fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and making sure that we have really solid information sets out there, being able to explain exactly what it is, exactly what it does, exactly the use cases, and really dispel a lot of the misinformation that's out there.
Excellent.
Yeah, I will just agree with all what was said. I don't have much to say here, except that there is a political battle here. So being here in the US, I'm well aware that, for example, the US government is not using 5G because the Asian companies, Chinese companies are actually hold the patents for 5G. So I don't know where this will go in this regard. Just wanted to throw it out there for the business leaders to be aware.
I do find it interesting as well. NVIDIA has so many patents and different technologies around the chips of 5G. So it's interesting, similar how Slack has taken over the world from a guy that used to be all about gaming. It seems like gaming is ruling the world now. Like if there's any kind of interesting stuff going on, it's happening in gaming. And then the gamers are asked the question, well, how do you affect the rest of the world that might not be on your platform? So it's an interesting one. Andrea, any thought on this one before we move on?
No, I think same thing. I think we should just keep going because I'm saving up my thoughts.
All right. This is kind of the bread basket of AI. I mean, this is what AI has been up until now and probably will be for, the near indeterminate future. And essentially it's like, if you can do a task in 2 or 3 seconds as a human, AI machine learning can probably do that and can probably in a lot of cases do that well, do that more globally, do that with a lot of crunching of data much quicker and less, and 24 hours a day versus kind of the 8 hours a day that we all end up working. So machine learning came in at 3. This was a subset of the 3 different AIs that we split out. So we've split them out, 2 of which we've covered off. We haven't covered off the other one yet. So thoughts on this one, panel?
Yeah, again, it's really good to see AI split out into the different categories. Machine learning is really interesting. One of the things that is a challenge with machine learning is bias in data sets. So being able to make sure that we're looking at, and the more times you run the data set, the more times it gets bias is introduced. So I think it's important to make sure that we're looking at data in our data collection, that it's not just data in echo chambers, because then that will create even greater echo chambers. So with machine learning, it's an art and a science, kind of like statistics. With statistics, you can essentially, what data do you want your study to say, which is pretty unethical, but it happens all the time. So we want to be very careful that we're looking at, what is reality in this case, and how is it informing our decisions? And because we might want to see an outcome, don't make that assumption. Make sure that you're gathering a wide, diaspora of information across the globe as much as you can.
Mihaela.
Yeah, I mainly agree with what was said. My machine learning is kind of, when I was doing my PhD many years ago, it just came out, and I think it's pretty ripe, and I think it is at the right place right now with regard to impact. So you chose it very well. I do not think there are so many issues with it right now. I like that it's there and it helps us for decision making. It helps my Google Maps learn my path and where is my home and all this stuff. So it is an excellent tool to have. I think it is ripe and it is at the right place.
Wonderful. All right, number 2. There should be some kind of snare drum in the background doing the drum roll here. Internet of Things. We've covered it off. We've covered a lot in this, that it's really tough to atomize these technologies and say this is just in this compartment over here, because they spread across so many different things. But the whole idea of a grid of things that connects and plays with each other and sends you things automatically and creates different commerce and benefits, and so the things are speaking to us as opposed to people. So it's number 2. It was at number 2 last time. I think it's probably got a lot more traction, and I think the pandemic has probably loosened up our thought in terms of what this could provide us as well. Thoughts from the panel on this one?
So with Internet of Things, privacy becomes very important, because when all of your data is out there, how do you protect your data? So I think we should be thinking about that hand in hand with Internet of Things right from the very, very beginning. The other thing is that, this is, again, another technology that is enabled by 5G and big data. So it's nice to see kind of, as you go up the list, you can kind of see the holistic arc of how things may play out over the next few years. And it'll be interesting to see what the next couple of lists are.
I would also just quickly add that we had cybersecurity at 5, and certainly it plays a role with this. I mean, if you're going to put everything out there, potentially susceptible to other, black hats out there, you hopefully can have something that's geared down. Mihaela?
Definitely crucial technology, and it's also known as ubiquitous computing, as Andrea was mentioning, when the computer fades in the background and it's like air, So now we have sensors which are so miniaturized that we can really design the smart city, which you mentioned in the beginning. I mean, smart city is just a conglomerate of technologies, but all revolve around the Internet of Things. So smart transportation, smart energy, especially savings and saving on those and going on with the SDGs. So even you can now track chemicals. Is this the right chemical in my water or not? Is this the right chemical in this toy which I give to my child? So Internet of Things with this graphene, as I mentioned, as tattoos or very, very thin sensors, will play a revolutionary role. It's already playing it, but it has the right place there.
So I'm going to jump in with something from the community. There was a question about personalization of security coming along with this. So, and we're already seeing this where, people, first of all, who owns all of this information, who has the rights to it? Should we be able to charge you for it? If Google uses it in Australia, should the media get it? I mean, it's just really interesting. And also the Internet of Things is also, to a certain extent, biological as well, like the privacy of data. It used to be mechanical, like Internet of Things was RFID when it was first talked about, right? And it's moved so far beyond that in terms of, like you were saying, Mihaela, the invisibility of it is kind of the creepiest aspect of all sometimes. So personalization of security, and like with the health data, do I really want my employer knowing this or that about my, vaccination status? Well, we need it if you want to get on a plane, but I'm not sure that I want people around me to know all of that. So there's some blurry lines around Internet of Things and what that's becoming. So thanks to the community for bringing that up. So number one, there is a drum roll, by the way.
And our last one, so you can beat your computers or desks or whatever, but coming up as number one.
Whoa.
We said AI was split into 3 different parts. This is the part that we think is the most interesting over the next decade. It's not AI or humans, or at least in this decade, it's AI and humans. And how does AI work alongside us to actually help our day-to-day jobs, be it manufacturing, service, government, strategy, what have you.
And I'll also jump in really fast and add something from the community, which is the advancements in neuroscience that are allowing people, I don't know if you've seen these things, but you think the thought and suddenly the game does the thing. You don't even have to have an interface. So thanks to the community for bringing up the advancements in neuroscience as related to the importance of augmented intelligence. Okay, so now, Mihaela, I'm sure you have lots to say on this one.
Well, of course I have a lot to say, but it's, it is indeed not new in a way. So it is right, because we used to call it computer-aided, device or something, computer-aided decision-making. So augmented intelligence right now is taking very interesting aspects from brain-computer interfaces, in which I am being enabled now to interact with things around me. Yes, and they are going to speak to me, and eye tracking and other things. So again, interactions, but also let's say some chatbot whispering in my ear. Okay, so go right here, or look, there is a pedestrian which you don't see, but in 10 minutes it's gonna reach where you're gonna turn right, so be very careful about that. So this sort of augmented intelligence has crucial importance in improving our life, in saving lives, and of course making everything better. For now, that's all I have to say.
Great. Alexandra?
Yeah, so augmented intelligence, I mean, in some ways you can argue that we've had this for years just with our smartphones. You know, we have a literal supercomputer with us. I'd say for the last decade, most everyone has one. So that allows us to make better decisions. That allows us, you know, better access to information. So it'll be interesting as this becomes more fluid and natural. And, you know, will that be also rolled out equally, or will that go to a few people? Technology is always a little bit buggy at the very beginning. So I'd be curious to see kind of what we learn and just the ethics around that, and then how that's used in the real world. Because I think the ability to, you know, more information, more data is always better. I mean, if you look at some of the early runnings of Go, and, you know, the top Go player with, you know, against an artificial intelligence, and just the ability to abstract, you know, 10,000 data points versus say 100, you make much better information, or much better informed decisions, and you're able to see multiple steps ahead. Whereas if you're only looking at a certain amount of data, you've got that, you know, that focus that will maybe get you a couple of steps ahead. But to be able to make, you know, the really interesting moves, you need all of the data. And as humans, we're really bad at that. Computers are very, very good at that. So I think that that's something that we should be looking at as well as the use cases as this becomes more and more natural.
So that's a great, I'm sorry, go ahead, Mihaela.
From there, yes. So for example, when to return to the office, when to open a city, when to open restaurants. So all these decisions are made in that way. So it is augmented intelligence. So we cannot make those decisions without exactly what Alexandra mentioned, that kind of technology backing our decision making. So yes,
that's amazing. That's right. And I'll do the transition because I'd love to ask Sean the next slide. I would love for you to weigh in first on this, because we've been talking about the technologies, and there's a lot of chat as well about you know, the details of what we're calling the ingredients of this list. But it's actually the combinations and the ways that they're going to evolve together and in concert with other forces that are really important. And you promised us, Sean, that you would get us to the digital leader skill set, you know, an effective technology digital leader skill set. I'd love for you to weigh in first, because you've been thinking about this for years. What's your take on that?
Well, and I'll recognize that we've gone a little bit past the hour, but it was 30 technologies. Like, we jammed it in here, guys. So it's like, we'll take their permission to go a few minutes after. Yeah, I mean, I think customarily, if you looked at a CIO and a CTO, it was, how do we keep the trains running on time? And how are you the most technically proficient person in the business? That is no longer, for sure. We need innovators. We need transformationists. We need people that actually understand who this is meant for in terms of an insight to the voice of the customer or the citizen. And yes, we do need people that are literate in tech and digital media, but as we've identified today, try to be literate with 30 different technologies. I don't know of one person that's a master of all of these. And so hopefully that's what we're building. And, you know, I would argue that if you're in the C-suite, if you're any kind of CXO, your job is technology. It's not handed to the guy that knows a little bit more than you from the bits and bytes. So that's my thought on digital leadership.
Great. So this is always challenging at the end because we're always running out of time, but any thoughts around the horn? We would love to hear from Mihaela and Alexandra. You know, what did you learn? What surprised you? What wows are you going to come away with? What are you going to think about from this conversation? Let's start with Mihaela.
Definitely the leadership aspect is the most crucial. Technologies will change. Next year we'll have another round of them, and maybe others will make the top. What is important is for leaders, you know, when it comes to innovation, it's not necessarily change management, but there is a new branch that is developing now, which is called innovation management. And that is more like the leaders have to lead from behind as innovation advocates and come with this new vision for a better world and why these technologies are actually imperative for us to adopt. So the why is more important than the tech here. So that's my message here in the desire to build a better world with technology.
Great. Alexandra, around the horn.
Yeah, so it's nice to see it's interesting to see all the technologies together in the list. And, you know, I've been looking at emerging tech for the last several years. And it's good to see kind of what's come up in the world and kind of what's gone down. As far as, one of the most important things I think for technology leaders going forward is really, it's not just the silos of information, it's really working together as a team. Sean, like you were saying, you know, the CEO or the C-suite needing to speak more with the, you know, technology gurus in the company. I think that that's really important. There's got to be a lot of that sort of embedded tech thinking. You want to be thinking always about what data is telling you and always kind of what the customers are asking for. You want to make sure that your interfaces are seamless and you've got multiple options for things, that everything is very intuitive, especially as I think smart technology companies will kind of take the tech and fade it into the background and make it more about user experience going forward.
Well, I'll do really quick round the horn and then I'm going to throw it to you, Sean. So I learned two incredible things to think about in addition to our hilarious joke about the bear versus human market. So solve versus unravel. It's really interesting, this notion of, you know, as I remember like early days when, you know, right in the early days of the internet, and you couldn't even like compress things. You know, you couldn't atomize things. They were all glommed together. Things were analog. And then as soon as you could digitize it, it's like, wow, what are the rights for who owns the 20% digital version of the Mona Lisa? You know, you couldn't have that question before then. So there's a solve and then there's an unravel, and it's a cycle. So I'm going to think about that a lot, like what's coming. And once again, I think it's video and sort of a whole different way that those signals are going to be shared, et cetera. And I'm looking at Amazon and some of their moves. And second of all, I thought from Alexandra, I really thought a lot about FUD, you know, the fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And I loved the way that you presented it, because it was kind of you should have a fair amount of it actually. And yet you should also not have too much to keep you, to keep you so scared that you don't do anything. So I've got lots to think about. And it was actually, this really was my favorite webcast so far this year. Oh, I'm sorry. Was it our first?
And our only one so far.
No, but it really was. It was incredible. And also, hey, I got to say kudos to my partner, Sean Moffitt, who I don't even know where all these things come from, Sean. Like, this is an amazing study that's been done so well over the years, and looking at other research that's done, that's boring or it's just facts without any applicability. This is really future-proofed. It's energizing. It's provocative. It's, you can take it to the bank, but it's also really geared to really empower leaders, empower a community to take this curiosity and be able to solve different problems and imagine new things based on it. So yay, Sean. Kudos for this study. It's so refreshing.
I will pay the respect back, and particularly, hopefully in 2 years' time, I won't be making this preface or comment, but it's just so refreshing and interesting having a conversation about technology with three women, very intelligent, articulate women, because I've been at way too many blockchain conferences where it feels like the blue suits of bankdom and whatever have taken over, and it's all man. And I think things are changing, which is good. So my hope is I don't have to make that caveat up front. And my panel today have been absolutely amazing. And I want to thank you for stepping up and wading into this. As a pivot to the last minute of our discussion before we wrap up, because we have gone long on this one. First of all, I want to thank our panelists. Secondly, I want to say this does not end here. We will be producing a report in March. And as part of that report, we are building a cabal of different experts from around the world that can weigh in on each one of these 30 technologies. My hope is my two panelists today might agree to be in some way part of our little squad of people moving forward. As well, our next episode coming up in February, we have something called Corporate Innovation Archetypes. It's our second episode of the year. Andrea posted this on her LinkedIn wall the other day out of our book, and it got a lot of traction. It's the Myers-Briggs personality test for innovation. And so we're looking at it from a corporate innovation standpoint. We are going around the world with our book and our venture. On February 16th, we'll be in Africa. So we're looking at introducing future-proofing as an argument and a movement to the world in Africa, middle of February. And finally, once again, a little bit of a pixelated slide here, unfortunately, but March 26th, we are bringing our first cohort in to do a future-proofing you. So that is all we have for today. I want to thank our panelists once again. I want to thank Andrea. And very quickly, we'll be seeing you in the future.